The late autumn backyard was filled with the aroma of charcoal-grilled meat. This family barbecue feast had been specially organized by my sister, who had invited all our relatives. Carrying a large platter of freshly grilled steaks, I squeezed sideways through the crowded throng, trying to place the meat on the long dining table. The crowd jostled me. I lost my footing, and my arm lightly brushed against my brother-in-law, who was standing by the table drinking. It was only an instant of accidental contact. Before I could even open my mouth to apologize, a scorching pain exploded across my face. The sharp crack of the slap drowned out the surrounding laughter and chatter. The platter slipped from my hands and crashed onto the lawn, steaks rolling everywhere. I stood frozen, clutching my cheek, my ears ringing. My brother-in-law glared down at me from his height, his voice shrill enough to reach every corner of the yard. "Don't ever touch me again. Pack your things and get out." The noise around us died instantly. Dozens of eyes pinned me like needles. I could hear whispers buzzing around me, each one pricking my skin. Humiliated and aggrieved, my eyes burned with tears. I instinctively looked at my own sister, hoping she would say something in my defense. But she only frowned, walked up to me, and said in an icy tone, without a trace of sympathy, "Either apologize to him now, or leave this instant." None of the elders present uttered a word of mediation, they all silently condoned what had happened. Over the years, I had used my hard-earned wages to support my sister's family. When my brother-in-law was starting his business and short on funds, I handed over my savings. I never missed a household chore, or a gift for their child. I had given everything I had to this family, and in return, I received this unjust, public humiliation. The pent-up grievances of years collapsed in that moment. I did not argue, nor did I bow my head in a groveling apology. Slowly, I released my hand from my cheek, glanced down at the scattered mess of meat on the grass, then swept my gaze over my cold-eyed sister and my contemptuous brother-in-law. Without a word, I turned and walked straight out of that laughter-filled backyard. The murmurs of relatives and my sister's scolding faded behind me. I knew that today's slap had severed, once and for all, every shred of warmth I had ever felt for this family. I did not go home to cry or make a scene. Instead, I quietly arranged everything. That night, as my sister and brother-in-law returned home with the relatives, their merriment still hanging in the air, the moment they pushed open the front door, a cataclysm that would upend their entire lives was already waiting inside. The early autumn evening breeze carried the lingering scent of grilled meat from the yard, but it stirred no appetite in me. I stood in the shadow of the street corner. The sting on my cheek had faded, replaced by something cold and heavy, a clarity that felt like stone. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket, the screen flashed my sister's name, Catherine, over and over, as relentless as the sharp sound of that slap in the yard. I didn't answer. I silenced it, tucked it back into my jeans, and looked up at the house with its warm yellow lights, my in-laws' home, where the barbecue had taken place. I could picture the scene inside, Catherine frowning, tossing her phone onto the sofa, muttering, "She's getting more and more unreasonable." Michael, my dear brother-in-law, would be lounging in his father's favorite leather armchair, swirling a glass of red wine, sneering at my disappearance. The rest of the relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins, would exchange knowing glances and smoothly steer the conversation back to the upcoming Mid-Autumn Festival, the new car someone bought, or whose child had topped the class. No one would actually look for me. No one would care about the mark on my face. In their eyes, I had always been the orphan shuffled among relatives after our parents died young, the perpetual outsider, the tag-along. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how many remittance slips and holiday gifts I sent to bridge that invisible chasm, it remained deep and bottomless. But tonight, I was done filling it. I was going to blow it up. I looked down at my canvas sneakers still flecked with grass clippings, took a deep breath, and strode forward, not toward that house, but toward the opposite direction, to my rented apartment in the city. The streetlight stretched my shadow long behind me, like a silent vow. I knew that from this night onward, Emily, the one who always smiled apologetically and tiptoed around everyone, would cease to exist. On my way home, I detoured to a 24-hour convenience store, and bought a bag of frozen dumplings and a can of beer. After 3 minutes in the microwave, the dumplings gave off a mix of cheap flour and frozen meat filling. I chewed mechanically, and finally, tears fell silently into the paper bowl. Not tears of sorrow, but of release. I opened my laptop. On the screen sat an email I had started long ago, but never sent. The recipient was the finance director of Michael's company, a connection I had secured through a college friend. Attached was a detailed comparative analysis of accounts, 3 months' worth of painstaking work I had done while helping him with part-time bookkeeping. For the past 2 years, Michael's seemingly thriving building materials trading company had been funneling huge sums of money under project prepayments into a personal offshore account he controlled. The amount was large enough to bring both him and the company to ruin. I had originally intended to wait for the right moment and show this to him privately, to warn him before it was too late. After all, he was my sister's husband and my nephew Evan's father. But that slap erased my last hesitation. I deleted the carefully worded admonition I had drafted and typed a curt line, "Mr. Bennett, please find the attached document for your review. I believe the board will find it most interesting." Then I moved my cursor over the send button, paused 3 seconds, and clicked. The message sent notification popped up like a gunshot. I closed my laptop, took a long swig of beer, and felt the cold liquid slide down my throat into my stomach, bringing a sharp pang. This was only the first step. Over the next 3 days, I took annual leave, switched off my phone, and locked myself in my apartment. I searched the internet for laws on domestic violence, public insult, and personal injury, and anonymously consulted a few lawyer forums. That slap hadn't left a bruise. Michael was clearly an expert. He knew exactly how much force to use, but dozens of witnesses had seen it. If anyone were willing to testify, it would be enough to bring charges. But I knew that was a fantasy. None of those so-called relatives would side with me. So I needed something more hidden, more lethal. I opened another folder, evidence I had accumulated over the years about Michael's other hobbies. He loved gambling, throwing money away in Macau and Las Vegas. The entry and exit records he thought he had destroyed, the credit card statements from casino memberships, the tipsy boasts he had made in front of me. I had recorded them all, piece by piece, organized meticulously. These alone might not be fatal, but combined with the offshore funds, they formed a complete chain of evidence, embezzlement of company funds for overseas gambling. And Catherine. I opened a cloud photo album she had forgotten on the family iPad. It contained intimate pictures from the past 2 years. Catherine with her personal trainer Leon from the gym, in settings ranging from hotel rooms to seaside resorts. In those photos, Catherine smiled brightly and relaxed, a smile I had never seen her wear with Michael. I flipped through them one by one. I felt no anger, only a cold, almost clinical calm. "So you've been wearing a mask too, sister. When you told me to apologize, you were only thinking of smoothing things over quickly, preserving your gilded life, weren't you?" I selected 3 photos, cropping out Leon's face, but leaving Catherine's profile and silhouette clearly visible, along with distinctive background details that pinpointed the locations. Then I registered a temporary anonymous email account and set up timed sends. The photos to Catherine, for Saturday, at 10 a.m., the time of her weekly spa appointment when her phone would be away from her. and the anonymous tip about Michael's finances to his company's board and tax authorities, for Monday at 3 p.m., right after their weekly executive meeting, the moment most likely to be overlooked as to source and most likely to trigger internal upheaval. Once everything was set, I blocked all relatives' numbers. I glanced at the flood of messages on WeChat and WhatsApp. Most were from Catherine, her tone shifting from "Where are you? Everyone's looking for you" to "Emily, stop being silly, come home," and finally, "If you keep this up, don't call me sister anymore." I didn't reply to any. One message stood out, from my aunt, gentle and hesitant, "Xiao Ari, are you okay?" About that day, I just froze. "Please don't do anything rash." I stared at those words for a long time, then typed 4 characters back, "I'm fine, aunt." And I closed that chat too. On Friday evening, I packed a simple suitcase. I left most of my belongings in the apartment, only took my ID, bank book, a few changes of clothes, and the portable hard drive filled with evidence. I booked a high-speed train ticket to a southern coastal city for the next morning, where my college roommate Penny had returned after graduation to open a small design studio. I sent her a message, "Penny, I'm coming to stay with you for a while. Is that okay?" She replied almost instantly, "Your room is ready. Come anytime." Saturday dawned, and the city was still asleep. I slung my backpack over my shoulder, pulled my suitcase, and gently closed my apartment door. The elevator descended slowly. I crossed the lobby and stepped out into the cool morning air and quiet streets. I took out my phone, cast one last look toward the direction of that home I had tried so hard to belong to, the home that had always seen me as an outsider, and switched it off completely. The high-speed train raced through golden fields, the scenery scrolled past in a blur. I put on my earphones, and the playlist shuffled to an old song, a slow, melancholy melody. I didn't cry. I just gazed out the window, feeling that tight knot in my heart begin to loosen, little by little. I wasn't running away. I was clearing the battlefield. Those timed emails would explode like precision missiles at their most vulnerable moments, and I didn't need to be there. I only needed to watch from afar. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Catherine lay on a spa bed, a face mask on, enjoying a soothing aromatherapy massage. Her phone sat silent in her locker, its screen flickering with notifications from an unfamiliar sender. And Michael, in his spacious office, frowned at his computer screen, utterly unaware that a report capable of sending him to prison was already resting in the inboxes of his superiors and tax auditors, waiting only for the right moment on Monday afternoon. The early autumn sunlight poured into the train car, warm and unfiltered. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, a genuine, light smile touched my lips. The train was speeding southward. Behind me, dominoes were about to fall. And I was no longer at the table. Monday at 3 p.m., I sat on the balcony of Penny's studio in a rattan chair, enjoying the sea breeze and a cup of Osmanthus oolong she had brewed, squinting at the tourists playing on the distant beach. My phone was still off, but Penny's laptop was on, connected to the Wi-Fi, and a little red dot in the corner of the screen quietly indicated new mail. I walked over and clicked. It was a read receipt automatically forwarded from my temporary anonymous email. Catherine had read the email with the photos at 10:07 a.m. on Saturday. And the more critical tip about the board and tax authorities showed as delivered. I set down my teacup, fingers gliding over the trackpad, and opened the family group chat I hadn't logged into for ages. The messages still stopped at the day I disappeared, filled with guesses and a few perfunctory, "don't worry" comments. I scrolled up a few pages and found a full-yard photo my cousin had casually taken before the barbecue. In the corner, Michael stood sideways by the grill, tongs in hand, wearing that smug, self-assured expression of control. I stared at him for a few seconds, then left the group and set Catherine's WeChat and WhatsApp to mute notifications. Penny poked her head out of the kitchen, a piece of dried mango in her mouth. So, has your sister contacted you? Not yet, I said, returning to the balcony and picking up my tea again. Probably still in shock. And I was right. Less than 2 hours later, Penny's phone on the coffee table lit up. It was her mother. She answered, listened for a bit, her expression shifted, and she cupped the receiver to whisper to me, "Mom asks if your sister is in trouble." There was a huge blow-up in the family group just now. I set down my cup and gestured for her to put it on speaker. My aunt's voice, heavy with our hometown accent, came through. "Oh, you don't know. Your aunt called just now, crying her eyes out, saying Catherine suddenly had a huge fight with Michael at home and smashed the TV. It was something about some photos. Your aunt couldn't catch it all, but she said Catherine stormed back to her parents' house, and Evan was crying." What on earth happened? Penny looked at me. I took a sip of tea, expressionless, and tapped my knee lightly with a finger. The show was beginning. Over the next 3 days, I played the role of a calm observer, piecing together the storm's outline from snippets Penny gathered from various relatives. Catherine didn't stay at our parents' house long. Reportedly, she slunk back the next day. That didn't surprise me. She was practical, no matter how angry or humiliated. She prized maintaining her standard of living above all. Besides, Evan was still young. Divorce meant property division, custody battles, and a total social collapse. She went back, likely to placate Michael and try to contain the damage from those 3 photos. She probably thought that if she gritted her teeth and endured, as she had countless times before, the family glue would seal everything up again. But she didn't know that the real crack wasn't from her, it was from Michael's books. On Tuesday evening, Penny learned from a friend that Michael's company was in turmoil. The board had received an anonymous complaint. Tax auditors had descended on the office on Wednesday morning and seized the finance department's computers. Michael had been called in for questioning and came out pale as a sheet, nearly crashing his car into the company gatepost. I listened, my heart beating steady and strong. I could picture it. Michael's usually slicked-back hair falling disheveled over his forehead, his trademark condescending smirk frozen into sheer panic. He probably never dreamed that the hand that tipped them off belonged to the sister-in-law he had slapped in public and thrown out like trash. Friday evening, Penny got her 3rd call from her mother. The tone had shifted from shock to worry. "Your aunt just told me quietly that Michael's in big trouble. It's not just tax, apparently something about embezzlement. Huge amounts. Your aunt's family is in chaos, trying every connection, but they say the evidence is solid, even the lawyers say it's bad." She also asked if anyone knows where Emily is. Catherine has been looking everywhere, but the phone's dead, her apartment's empty. It seems she wants Emily to help Michael somehow. Since Emily did part-time accounting for that company, maybe she could prove some accounts were clean. I listened, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at my lips. Ask me to vouch for clean accounts. Catherine, are you really that naive, or just desperate enough to grasp at straws? Penny hung up and looked at me, a complex expression on her face. Emily, did you do all this? I was silent for a few seconds, then shook my head gently. I just put what should have been seen in the places where it needed to be seen. That night, for once, I opened a bottle of white wine from Penny's fridge. We sat on the balcony. The sea breeze was stronger than in the previous days, carrying a salty tang. Far out on the water, fishing boats' lights dotted the darkness like scattered gold dust. I finished my glass slowly, feeling for the first time a complete, guiltless lightness. The next day, Saturday, the sun was brilliant. I helped Penny sort her design samples, chatting idly and deliberately avoiding family topics. But at noon, Penny's phone rang again. This time it was her cousin, a banker, who rarely meddled in family affairs. After she hung up, she came over with a grave expression and handed me her phone. "My cousin says I must tell you, Michael was taken away by the police early this morning. Suspected of embezzlement, a huge amount. They even froze part of Catherine's accounts. He said your sister is completely panicked, looking everywhere for you and..." Penny paused. "She's asked all the relatives to pass on a message. She was wrong. She shouldn't have treated you that way. Please come back, at least, pick up the phone." I listened quietly. Then I took Penny's phone and, in front of her, pressed the power button again. As the screen went dark, I said, "Penny, let's go for a walk along the beach this afternoon." We walked along the long coastline for hours, until the setting sun stretched our shadows far, far behind us, finally melting into the dusk. I walked barefoot on the wet sand, feeling the grains slip between my toes, cool and clean, as if washed anew. Penny walked beside me, occasionally glancing sideways, but asking nothing. When we got back to the apartment, night had fully fallen. Penny went to shower, and I sat alone in the living room, turning on the spare phone with the new SIM card. The screen lit up, signal bars jumped, and then a flood of missed call alerts and texts poured in, nearly crashing the phone. Most were from Catherine, a few from my aunt and uncle, and, unexpectedly, from Michael's mother, the lady who had chatted with my aunt throughout the barbecue as if she'd seen nothing. Her message was polite, almost pleading. "Emily, I know Michael did wrong, and you were hurt. But we're still family. What will become of your sister and Evan? Can you, for your nephew's sake, not take things too far? We can talk about any conditions you have." I stared at that text, my finger hovering over the screen. Family. Too far. Conditions. Such familiar logic. When they held the upper hand, I was a soft target they could knead as they pleased. Once the tables turned, they waved the family banner to drag me back to the negotiating table. I deleted that message, along with a dozen voice messages from Catherine. I didn't listen to them. I no longer needed to confirm whether her tone was panicked, angry, or falsely gentle. None of that mattered anymore. Her world was collapsing, brick by brick, according to my blueprint, and I was already standing outside the ruins. Just as I was about to turn off the phone again, a text came in from an unknown number. No salutation, no signature, just one line. "Emily, where are you? Evan has been asking all day where his aunt went. He doesn't know what happened that day. Can you bear to let him grow up without his mother and without his aunt?" I gripped the phone, my fingers tightening. Evan, that 6-year-old with dimples who would throw his arms around my legs every time I came with toys. He was the only innocent in this entire affair, the only one who made me waver in the dead of night. But I quickly recalled that moment in the yard, Catherine's cold gaze, Michael's raised hand, the collective silence of the relatives around me. When they struck, did they ever think that Emily was someone's little sister too? Did they ever imagine how that humiliation would scar a young woman? I set the phone on the coffee table, its screen slowly fading. Through the window, I could hear the vague murmur of the tide, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of this unfamiliar coastal city. I leaned back on the sofa, closed my eyes, and let darkness and stillness wrap around me. Tomorrow was a new day. And Evan, perhaps one day, when he's grown, I'll find a way to tell him that his aunt didn't leave because she didn't love him, but because the people who loved him had burned the bridge with their adult selfishness and indifference. And I simply chose not to wait on the broken side. The next 2 weeks, I completely severed all ties with my old life. My new phone stored only Penny's number and a few genuinely trustworthy college friends. Penny found me a temporary assistant job, handling some copywriting and client coordination for her design studio. The workload was light, the pay fair, enough to cover my basic expenses. I terminated my old apartment lease, donating my remaining belongings to a clothing recycling bin downstairs. Then, in an older neighborhood near the sea, I rented a tiny, south-facing single room, its window offering a view of the silhouettes of harbor cranes. My landlady, a retired primary school teacher in her 60s named Mrs. Jew, was spry and warm-hearted. After collecting the rent, she gave me an extra pot of mint, saying with a smile, "Young lady, when you're alone out here, a little green on the balcony keeps your heart from feeling lost." I didn't tell her whether I felt lost. I just opened the window every morning, let the salty sea breeze blow in, watered the mint, and walked 15 minutes to Penny's studio. Life became simple and regular, emails and copy in the mornings, lunch with Penny and the 2 other girls at the studio, takeout or frozen dumplings, afternoons running to the print shop or courier, evenings returning to buy a bunch of greens and a couple blocks of tofu from the market downstairs, and cooking a light noodle soup for dinner. Weekends I occasionally biked along the coast with Penny, or spent an afternoon browsing old bookshops in the historic district. The quiet brought by information isolation was jarring at first. Accustomed to my phone buzzing every few minutes with messages from family groups and Catherine's care, the sudden silence felt like a thick quilt, comforting but also a little lonely. Gradually, though, I began to enjoy this vacuum. No tones to interpret, no expectations to meet, no ticking time bombs of family news. But the world is still connected. About 4 weeks after my complete disappearance, Penny, during a lunch break, pushed a bowl of cut mangoes toward me. She hesitated, then spoke. "Emily, my mom told me yesterday. Michael's case has officially been filed. The amount is huge. They say he won't get out anytime soon. Your sister, she moved back to your aunt's place with Evan, because there's more space and someone can help with the child. Your aunt's health wasn't great to begin with, and all this has made her blood pressure spike." I forked a piece of mango, chewed slowly, letting the sweet sour juice melt on my tongue. "And Evan? How's he?" Penny shook her head. "Not sure. Mom says the kid probably doesn't fully understand, he just keeps asking where Dad is. Your sister's been running around, contacting lawyers, Michael's side of the family, she's overwhelmed. And she's still looking for you, asking several people if they have your new number." I set down the fork and gazed at the plane tree on the street corner, its leaves stirring in the September breeze. "Tell her I'm fine and she doesn't need to look for me." I paused. "And tell my aunt not to worry too much. Once I'm settled, I'll send her a postcard." Penny nodded and didn't press further. She was a smart girl. She knew some wounds just need time to scab over. Another weekend at dusk, I walked along the seawall, all the way to an unlit pier at the end. The sea was painted a brilliant orange-red by the setting sun. A few seagulls circled low in the distance. I leaned on the railing, pulled out the spare phone, hesitated, then turned it on. After the boot animation, the screen lit up, and again a torrent of messages poured in. Most were voice messages from Catherine, along with a few texts from my aunt, whose tone had shifted from concerned pleading to anxious reproach. I scrolled through them all and stopped at a text from Catherine, sent 3 days earlier. "Emily, no matter how much you hate me, Evan is innocent." Today he drew a picture of our family, but without his father, just me, him, and you. He said his aunt promised to give him a Lego set for his birthday. Does she not remember? I'm not asking you to forgive me, but you should at least look at this picture. He's been waiting for you. Below the voice note was an image. I opened it, a child's crayon drawing, crooked and colorful, 2 adults holding a child, standing in what looked like a garden, the adults' faces colored pink and brown, the child's face sporting an exaggerated smile. The sky was blue, with a big yellow sun. I stared at that picture for a long time, until the sea breeze made my eyes sting. Evan was indeed innocent. That realization was like a tiny thorn, pricking the hard shell I had built around myself. I remembered him at 3, calling me auntie in his baby voice, not quite pronouncing it right. At 5, when he had a fever and I stayed up all night with Catherine to take him to the hospital, and he clutched my finger in his daze. Those memories overlapped with this childlike drawing, and my throat tightened. But still, I exited the image and did not reply to that message. I switched off the phone, pocketed it, and turned back. Dusk had fully settled. Street lights were coming on one by one, stretching warm, lonely halos along the seawall. I knew that one day Evan would understand that his aunt's leaving wasn't because she didn't love him, but because the people who loved him had, with their adult selfishness and coldness, burned down the little bridge between them. And I had simply chosen not to wait on the other side. As I reached the gate of my apartment complex, the rich aroma of scallion oil wafted out. Mrs. Ju was cooking downstairs. She spotted me, leaned out her window, and her face crinkled into a chrysanthemum-like smile. "Xiao Chen. Come up and have some soup. I got fresh crucian carp today." I looked up and smiled back. "Coming, Auntie Ju." That evening, I sat in Mrs. Ju's small, warm kitchen, holding a bowl of milky crucian carp and tofu soup, listening to her chatter about the neighbor's cat getting lost again, and the cheap autumn pears at the market. The steam warmed my face with its real, human comfort. I felt, suddenly, that some corner of my heart was slowly healing. Days flowed on. By mid-October, the southern sea breeze carried a hint of chill. Penny's studio landed a big project, a packaging design for a local cultural brand, and I pulled several late nights, too busy to think. Yet some news, like message bottles washed ashore, always finds you when you least expect it. One weekday evening, as I was stuffing a stack of proof designs into courier envelopes, Penny came out from the back room with a strange look on her face. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a long voice message from her cousin, with a line of text, "Let Emily decide if she wants to listen." I hit play. Her cousin's voice was steady, but a subtle heaviness crept through. "Penny, tell Emily for me. Michael's case is basically settled. The prosecutor has approved the arrest. It's a big case, probably 3 to 5 years minimum. The family is in turmoil. Michael's parents want to take Evan, saying Catherine can't take care of him properly. But your sister won't agree. They've argued several times, and your aunt got so upset she fell ill. Also, your sister came to see me at the bank last week, and we talked for a long time. She cried. I've known her for years and never saw her cry like that. She said she knew she'd wronged Emily, and that day in the yard she was just stunned, didn't know how to handle Michael's temper, and with so many people around, she just wanted to calm things down. She asked me to tell Emily that she regrets it. Not just now because things are bad. She said she's thought about it many times since, and she should have protected Emily that day. The voice message ended. I stood there, holding the phone, motionless for a long while. Outside, the sky was darkening. Street lights came on, casting tree shadows across the studio's wooden floor, swaying gently. Penny edged closer and touched my arm. Are you okay? I handed the phone back and took a deep breath. I'm fine, I said, my voice calmer than I'd expected. Whether she regrets it or not, what happened happened. We can't go back. And Evan? Penny asked. I was silent for a moment, walked to the window, and looked down at the hurried pedestrians on the street below. Evan. I'll figure something out. But not now. If I go back now, I'll just get pulled back into that vortex. I need to stand firm myself before I can reach out to help someone else. That night, back in my rental room, I sat on the edge of the bed and thought for a long time. The harbor lights outside flickered on and off, like a silent breath. I picked up the spare phone, turned it on again, found the picture of Evan's drawing Catherine had sent, and saved it to my gallery. Then I texted Penny, asking her to relay to her cousin and to Catherine this message. Emily said she remembers Evan's birthday. She will send the Lego. Catherine doesn't need to look for her anymore, just take care of the child and herself. After sending that, I leaned back against my headboard and closed my eyes. The image of that early autumn afternoon rose in my mind, the yard full of barbecue smoke, the bustling crowd, and the sudden crack of a slap. It all seemed at once clear and foggy, like looking through frosted glass. And now, in this southern seaside night, the only sound was the distant, ceaseless tide, like time itself, moving forward, unhurried and steady. I knew that the long road toward reconciliation, or final rupture, was still ahead. But at least I had taken the first step, no longer driven by hatred, nor bound by guilt. The next morning, I woke early. I opened the window, the sea breeze was cool, and the mint glowed a fresh green in the morning light. I poured myself a glass of warm water and flipped open my calendar. On Evan's birthday, November 20th, I drew a small circle. Then I put on my jacket, locked the door, and walked, as usual, along the seaside street toward the studio. The sun fell warm on my shoulders, and the ground beneath my feet felt solid and steady. I knew I would walk this road for a long time yet. And ahead, whether storms or clear skies, it was already my own life to live. November's sea breeze had a bite of chill, but the sun still generously bathed this small southern city. I stood in the post office, clutching a carefully wrapped cardboard box, sealed with layers of tape to protect its contents. Inside was the latest Lego City Fire Station set. I'd done my homework. Evan had left a voice message in the family group the month before, in his babyish voice, saying he wanted it. Catherine had brushed him off with a "we'll see after New Year," but I remembered. On the express form, I filled in my aunt's address, the recipient as Evan, with a small note, from Auntie, "Happy birthday." For the return address, I left Penny's studio mailbox, without a specific unit number. As I handed the form to the clerk, my hand hesitated for a second, but I let it go. Leaving the post office, the sun was blindingly bright. I walked slowly along the street, the aroma of sugar-roasted chestnuts wafted from a nearby cart, reminding me that autumn was deepening. I bought half a gin, holding them to warm my palms, peeling one and popping it into my mouth, sweet and creamy, dissolving on my tongue. Life was simple, but its flavors were rich. On Evan's birthday, I didn't wait for news. In the morning, I ran to the print shop for Penny to confirm a proof. At noon, I had lunch with the studio girls at a new Vietnamese noodle place. The spicy sour broth made my nose tingle. In the afternoon, as I was organizing client feedback, my phone lit up. It was my aunt. I opened it, a short video, about 10 seconds long. Evan sat on the carpet, the Lego set spread out before him, already opening the parts, with colorful instruction sheets scattered around. My aunt's voice came from off-screen, tentative. "Xiao Ari, the package arrived." Evan was so happy he barely ate his lunch. He keeps saying he wants to thank Auntie. See. At the end of the video, Evan looked up at the camera and grinned, revealing the gap where his front tooth was missing, and lisped, "Thank you, Auntie. I love it." I watched the video twice, then replied with a short text, "Glad he got it. Tell him not to stay up too late building it." I said nothing else. That night, as I sat by the window watching the harbor lights, my phone buzzed again, a longer message from my aunt. I read it slowly. She said Catherine had lost a lot of weight recently, juggling Michael's legal proceedings, caring for Evan, and looking after my sick uncle. She looked exhausted. Catherine had learned about the Lego and locked herself in her room crying for a long time. She asked my aunt to pass on her thanks, and asked if Evan could call me every week. The child always talks about you, and your sister. She knows she was wrong before. She's afraid to contact you directly, in case you're upset. But she said, if you're willing, she'd like to find a chance to talk with you face to face, not to ask you for help, just to say she's sorry. I put down my phone and gazed out at the slow-moving cargo ship lights on the distant sea, orange-red dots flickering like steady breaths. I didn't reply immediately. I marked the message as unread, went to the kitchen, and heated a glass of milk. Life went on. At the end of November, Penny landed a new project, designing the visual identity for a boutique bed and breakfast, requiring a 2-day site visit to a neighboring county. She asked if I wanted to come along for a change of scenery. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. We drove Penny's little second-hand Polo along the coastal highway for over an hour. The view shifted from dense urban blocks to vast tidal flats and scattered fishing villages. The guest house sat on a hillside, facing the sea, backed by low green hills, with several old longan trees in the courtyard and a few rustic wooden tables under their shade. The owner, a woman in her 40s in a linen dress, spoke slowly and poured us homemade roselle tea. I sat in the yard, sipping the slightly tart tea, listening to her and Penny discuss design ideas, my gaze drifting over the low wall to the line where sea met sky. The wind carried a faint saltiness and the scent of vegetation. For a moment, I felt that tight knot in my chest loosen just a little. That night we stayed at the guest house. The room was small, but its window faced the ocean, and at night I could hear the distant tide, like a lullaby without lyrics. I tossed and turned for a while, then finally picked up my phone, opened my aunt's unread message, typed a few words and deleted them, repeated several times, and at last sent a brief reply. Aunt, let's hold off on the calls for now. Let her get her own life in order and take good care of Evan. We'll see about the rest later. After sending it, I turned off the screen, rolled over, and, lulled by the tide, slipped slowly into sleep. December brought the first hints of southern winter, a thin jacket needed in the mornings and evenings. Penny's studio grew busier as clients rushed year-end promotional materials. I often worked until after 7. But busy was good. The mundane work filled my mind, leaving little room to dwell on heavy thoughts. During this time, I still learned of family developments through Penny's mother. Michael's case entered judicial proceedings. Because of the enormous sum involved, the prosecution was reportedly seeking a substantial sentence. Catherine had hired a lawyer, but her available funds were tight due to frozen accounts. My aunt helped some, but it wasn't enough. Michael's parents, who had initially threatened to fight for custody of Evan, quieted down once Michael's likely sentence became clear. Reportedly, the old lady fell ill and spent 2 weeks in the hospital. When these tidings reached me, they no longer made my heart race or my palms sweat. They sounded muffled, like voices heard through a water barrier, distant and dim. I could even think calmly. Michael had paved his own way to this point, step by step. I had only pulled aside the curtain hiding that path. As for Catherine, much of her current predicament stemmed from the marriage she had chosen and the years of acquiescence she had practiced within it. I had no obligation to bear those consequences for her. In early January, something unexpected happened. One evening, as I returned from work and reached the entrance of my rental building, I saw Mrs. Jew standing by the unit door, talking to a woman in a dark grey coat. The woman had her back to me, slim, short hair, a silhouette that seemed unfamiliar yet made my heart lurch. Mrs. Jew spotted me first and waved. Xiao Chen. You're back. This lady says she's your sister. She's been waiting nearly an hour. The woman turned. It was Catherine. She had lost a lot of weight. Her chin was sharper, her eye sockets more sunken, and the fine lines at the corners of her eyes were visible under the streetlight. She wore a grey wool coat I hadn't seen before, over a black turtleneck. She looked plain and frail, a far cry from the impeccably made-up, sharp-edged sister I remembered. When she saw me, her lips moved, as if trying to smile or cry, but all she managed was a low, "Emily." I stood 3 steps away, still clutching the tofu and greens I'd just bought from the market, the plastic bag handles cutting into my fingers. The wind blew through the stairwell, carrying the dry cold of winter. Catherine and I locked eyes for a few seconds. Something intangible seemed to be settling in the air between us. "How did you find this place?" I heard my own voice, flatter than I'd expected. Catherine rubbed her hands together, whether from cold or nerves I couldn't tell. I asked Penny. She wouldn't tell me at first, but I begged her for a long time. I said I just wanted to apologize to you in person. I wouldn't pressure you into anything. She hesitated for ages, then finally gave me the address. She paused, her voice dropping lower. "Emily, I know you don't want to see me. But I came anyway. I'll just say a few words and go." Mrs. Ju looked at me, then at Catherine, and tactfully patted my shoulder. "Xiao Chen, it's cold, why don't you two go inside? I'll boil some hot water for you." She took out her keys, unlocked the unit door, and gestured for us to enter. The narrow hallway was dimly lit with yellow bulbs. Catherine followed me up to the 3rd floor and stopped outside my door. I unlocked it and let her in. The room was tiny, a single bed, a desk, a simple closet. The only splash of life was the pot of mint Mrs. Ju had given me, still green on the windowsill despite winter. Catherine stood in the middle of the room, looking large and awkward. She glanced around, her gaze pausing on the mint for an instant, then turned back to me, her eyes slowly reddening. "Emily," she began, her voice trembling, "that day in the yard, I was wrong. I shouldn't have asked you to apologize, and I shouldn't have let Michael hit you. At the time, my mind just went blank. There were too many people. My first instinct was to squash the scene to avoid embarrassment. I never imagined you'd be so hurt, let alone that you'd leave. After you left, I actually looked for you for many days, not just after Michael got into trouble, but from that very night. But your phone was off, you'd moved, and no one would tell me where you were." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she spoke, falling silently onto her coat collar. She didn't wipe them, just looked at me, as if trying to pour out months of words in one breath. "I know it's too late to say all this now. About Michael. I later learned that the materials came from you. At first, I hated you, truly hated you. I thought you destroyed our family. But then I gradually realized that the one who destroyed the family wasn't your email, it was Michael himself. It was the money he took. And it was me too, for pretending not to see. The first time he hit me at a dinner table, I should have left. But I couldn't bear to give up that home, or Evan, or the shame of being seen as a failure. So I endured, year after year, until I dragged you into it too." She stopped, took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside. I leaned against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, neither sitting nor speaking. The radiator gave a soft gurgle. Outside the window, the night was fully dark, and occasionally a dog barked downstairs. Catherine pulled an envelope from her coat pocket and placed it on my desk. "This is what Evan asked me to bring you. He drew it himself, insisted I hand it to you personally." She stepped back and looked at me once more. "Emily, I don't ask for your forgiveness. I came today to tell you to your face that I'm sorry. For all those years, the money you sent, the clothes and toys you bought for Evan, the times you helped me take care of Mom and Dad, I remember all of it. It's just that before, I always thought you were my younger sister, so it was only natural you'd help. I was wrong. You're my sister, but I never once truly acted like a sister to you. She finished, wiped her face with her sleeve, and gave me a faint, fragile smile. I'll go now. Aunt is watching Evan at home, it's late. You, take care of yourself out here, alone. She turned toward the door, her coat hem brushing the threshold. Just as her hand grasped the doorknob, I spoke. I'll take Evan's drawing. Tell him Auntie saw it. I paused. And about your lawyer, if you're short on money. I can lend you a bit. No rush to pay it back. Catherine's back stiffened for an instant. She didn't turn around, but her shoulders trembled slightly. After a long moment, she rasped out a thank you, then opened the door and walked into the dimly lit hallway. I listened to her footsteps descending the stairs, growing fainter, and finally swallowed by the soft click of the unit door closing. I stood alone in the empty room, looking at the envelope on the desk. I opened it. Inside was an A4 sheet of paper, watercolor painted, a chubby little figure standing by the sea, a big sun in the sky, and a line of crooked characters. Auntie, is the sun by the sea bigger than the one at home? I want to see it. Signed with Evan's name and a smiling face. I held that drawing and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The mint on the windowsill swayed slightly in the night breeze, as if offering wordless comfort. At that moment, I realized that nearly 4 months had passed since that slap in the yard. 4 months during which I had journeyed through anger, calculation, flight, and quiet rebuilding. And now, sitting here in this little room of my own, holding a child's clumsy artwork, what rose in my heart was not hate, not grievance, but a very faint, cool sensation, like the tip of a mint leaf. That was perhaps the beginning of forgiveness. Not for Catherine, not for Michael, not for those silent relatives, but for that little boy who drew the sun and the sea, and for myself, so I could walk forward a little lighter. I found a clear plastic folder, carefully placed the drawing inside, and put it in the deepest drawer of my desk. Then I sent my aunt a message. Aunt, Catherine came to see me today. I'm fine. I got Evan's drawing. Tell him to study hard, and I'll take him to see the real sea sometime. Also, let Catherine know I'll transfer the money for the lawyer tomorrow. After sending that, I put my phone aside and made myself a bowl of tomato and egg noodles. I sat under the warm yellow desk lamp, ate slowly, and finished every last drop of broth. My stomach was warm, the sea wind tapped against the window in a low moan, but it no longer made me feel alone. In the days that followed, Catherine didn't show up at my door again. But our contact began to re-establish itself in a cautious, gentle way. She would occasionally send me photos of Evan, his profile while doing homework, or his back as he chased a stray cat. In the yard. I would sometimes reply with a short line, asking about his studies, or reminding her to buy a heater for Aunt. Our conversations rarely touched on Michael, and never on that day in the yard, but we both knew the crack was there, and that we were both trying, clumsily and sincerely, to plant something new along its edges. Penny once asked me, "Do you think your sister has really changed? Or is she just relying on you because Michael's gone?" I thought for a long time, then answered, "People are complicated. It's a fact that she didn't help me that day in the yard. It's also a fact that she came all this way to say sorry. I don't need her to become a saint, and I don't need to be one either. I only need her to be good to Evan, and for me to be able to see Evan without having to bow my head or force a smile." Penny patted my shoulder and said no more. February arrived, and spring came unusually early to the south. One morning I opened the window and found that the bare magnolia tree downstairs had burst overnight into a canopy of pink-white buds, plump and crowded on every branch, as if it had saved all its strength through winter just for this moment. I stood at the window watching for a long time, and something inside me loosened too. That afternoon, I received a forwarded message from my aunt, from Catherine, with an electronic copy of the court judgment. Michael had been sentenced to 4 years and 6 months for embezzlement, with forfeiture of part of his personal assets. At the end of the message, Catherine added her own words, "The sentence is handed down. I actually feel more settled now. I'll walk my own path from here. Emily, thank you for the loan, I'll pay it back monthly." I closed the file without reading the details. Those numbers and legal clauses no longer mattered to me. I walked out to the balcony and watched the harbor cranes rise and fall, the golden sunlight scattering like silver coins on the sea. Spring was truly coming. I could already smell the earthy, grassy scent in the air. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling that space in my chest, once filled with anger and grievance, now open and clear. I knew there was still a long road ahead between me and that family. One day Evan would grow up and learn that the reason his father went to prison had a piece of the puzzle from his aunt. Would he hate me? I didn't know. But at least while he still believed his aunt would take him to see the sea and its sun, I could plant something warm and trustworthy in his heart. That Lego set was just the beginning. When spring deepened and the harbor wind no longer bit, I planned to save up enough money and bring Evan here for a few days in summer. Take him to collect shells on the beach, ride the harbor sightseeing ferry, show him the sun he drew. The sun here truly is different from back home. It rises from the sea horizon, as if washed clean by the water, bright and vast. That night, I sat at my desk, opened a new notebook, and wrote on the first page, "Rebuilding begins in spring." Then I turned to the first page and started a long list: plans for Evan's seaside trip, monthly savings goals, new skills to learn, books to read. The pen scratched across the paper. Outside, some unknown bird called in a crisp, brief note, like a light background melody to the night. Halfway through, my phone lit up, Penny's message: "Studio afternoon tea tomorrow. I ordered mango milk crepe, same place. Coming." I smiled and typed back one word, "Coming." Then I closed the notebook, stretched, pushed open the window, and let the February night breeze, carrying early spring's coolness, rush in. Far across the water, the harbor lights formed a long golden line, mingling with the stars on the sea, impossible to tell where lamp ended and star began. I leaned on the windowsill, quietly watching that light, and felt the ground beneath my feet growing steadily firmer. And ahead, in the distance, something new was quietly sprouting before dawn. March in the southern city brought more rain, days of drizzling spring rain that filled the air with the smell of wet grass. Penny's studio had a new illustrator, a young man named Aining, who wore a small ponytail and had crinkly eyes when he smiled, with a slight Taiwanese accent. He painted beautiful watercolors, especially of seaside sunsets and fishing boats. One day, as he was hunched over a client's rush project, I passed by, glanced at his work, and couldn't help complimenting his use of color. He looked up and smiled at me, the tips of his ears flushing pink. That moment gave me a slight jolt, a subtle stirring, the kind that belongs to one's age, nudged by that blush. I hadn't paid attention to the opposite sex in a long time. 4 years, my life revolved entirely around family, working, saving, sending money, pleasing relatives, looking after Evan, like a little machine running day and night, completely ignoring that I too was a young person who deserved to be seen, liked, and treated gently. Penny caught my unnatural expression that day. After work, she dragged me to a dessert shop in the alley, scooped a big spoonful of red bean paste into her mouth, and mumbled, "Aining is good, you know, single, about your age, and I've already done some digging. His last relationship ended cleanly almost a year ago. Want me to set you up?" I nearly choked on my double-skinned milk, coughing several times before recovering. "Don't be silly. He's a colleague, we see each other every day. It'd be so awkward." "Oh come on," Penny put down her spoon, looking at me seriously. "Emily, You ran away from all that precisely to live in you, didn't you? Living in you means eating, sleeping, working, and falling in love. You're not a nun. I laughed, looked down, and stirred my sweet soup, not answering. But that night on my way home, I walked slowly, and when I passed the old banyan tree by the sea, I stopped and stood for a while, watching the moonlight filter through the dense leaves, scattering like silver coins at my feet. Penny was right, escape was only the first step. True rebirth meant slowly prying open, piece by piece, those parts of myself that had been flattened by my old life. At the end of March, I mustered the courage to do something small. That day, Aining was washing his cup in the break room, and beside him lay a small sketch he'd just finished, a sparrow sheltering from the rain under a rooftop eave, the watercolor clean and lively. I stood at the door for a few seconds, then said, "That sparrow looks just like the one on my hometown balcony. On rainy days, it would just sit on the clothesline and stare into space." Aining turned, smiled, and said, "Really? Then it must really like you, if it still wants to stay on your clothesline in the rain." We chatted casually from sparrows to rain in our hometowns, to our childhoods. He said he was from Tainan, grew up by the sea, and during typhoons the power would often go out, and the whole family would sit by candlelight shelling peanuts. I said I had lived in many places, but what I missed most was the few years I stayed with my aunt in middle school, when the yard had a big loquat tree that bore golden fruit every May. You could reach up and pick them. After that, we returned to our desks. I clutched my mouse, but didn't read a single word of the layout table on my screen. His words, "It must really like you," echoed in my head. My ears felt hot. I secretly pinched one and scolded myself for being so easily flustered. Early April, after Qingming, the weather suddenly warmed up. Girls on the streets changed into light spring dresses. I received a parcel from my aunt. Inside were a package of dried honeysuckle and a small jar of homemade pickled plums. A note in her shaky handwriting read, "Spring weather makes you prone to heat, drink honeysuckle tea." The plums were picked by Evan, he insisted on sending them. "Your sister found a job, doing admin at a company. The pay isn't much, but she's got more spirit now. We're all fine, don't worry." I put away the honeysuckle and plums, took a photo, and posted it in the small group I'd created in February, with only me, my aunt, and Catherine, named simply Home. The group was quiet most of the time. Occasionally Catherine would share a photo of Evan's award, or my aunt would forward a health article, and I'd reply with an emoji or a few words. Compared to the non-stop bombardment of the old family group, this light, restrained exchange felt comfortable. That night, I brewed a cup of the honeysuckle tea and sat on the windowsill, sipping it. The magnolia outside was in full bloom, pink-white blossoms shimmering under the streetlights like a dusting of snow. I pulled out my phone, opened Aining's WeChat avatar. We'd added each other the previous week. He would occasionally share his new sketches, and I'd give a like, or a brief beautiful. That night, after some hesitation, I sent him a message. "Received some honeysuckle from home today, brewed it, it's sweet. Are there any good spring places to visit in Nancheng?" I regretted it immediately, felt the question was too obvious. But it was too late to retract. Aining replied quickly, with 2 exclamation marks, "Yes. The wetland park on the outskirts, it should be full of wildflowers now. I went there last weekend and did some quick sketches, it's gorgeous. The weather looks great this weekend, want to go together? I can be your guide." I stared at those words, my heart racing a little. I guiltily turned the phone face down on my knee, took 2 deep breaths, then picked it up again and typed one word, "Okay." On the weekend, I got up early and agonized over my wardrobe for half an hour. Finally, I chose a light blue cotton dress, a cream white knitted cardigan, and tied my hair in a loose low ponytail, with a touch of lip balm, it was the first time this year I'd seriously looked in the mirror. The person I saw looked a little unfamiliar, a little fresh. Aining arrived on an old bicycle, with his sketchboard and folding stool strapped to the back. When he saw me, his eyes lit up for a moment, then quickly shifted away, and the tips of his ears reddened again. He cleared his throat and said, the wetland park is a bit far. I could cycle you there. If it's too tight, we could take the bus. I smiled, sat sideways on the bike's rear carrier, and lightly held the edge of the seat. The spring breeze blew toward us, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of grass and soil. Along the road, kapok trees bloomed fiercely, clusters of fiery red bursting from the branches like torches. Aining pedaled ahead, his back straight as a young tree. I said nothing, just lifted my face and let the sunlight pour down unobstructed. The wetland park was much larger than I'd imagined, wide expanses of water reflecting the blue sky and white clouds, egrets occasionally rising from the reeds. Aining found a spot with a good view and set up his easel. I sat on the grass beside him, watching him dip his brush and paint. He painted with intense focus, brow slightly furrowed, lips pressed in a line, occasionally pausing to study his work before adding a few more strokes. I didn't disturb him. I pulled out my own sketchbook. I had recently started learning to draw, though my lines were still clumsy, and made a few crude outlines of him. The result was crooked. I laughed at myself. Aining leaned over to peek at my sketchbook and burst out laughing. Is that me? I look like a potato with arms and legs. I snapped the book shut, blushed, and glared at him. You don't understand, this is abstract art. We spent most of that afternoon at the wetland park, and later strolled along a hillside covered in wildflowers, patches of purple vetch, and dandelions on both sides. I bent down, picked a dandelion, and blew gently toward the setting sun. The white fluff scattered and floated like a tiny snowstorm. Aining stood beside me, watching quietly, then said softly, Emily, you have a beautiful smile. You should smile more. I froze for a moment, still holding the dandelion stem, feeling my ears burn. I turned away, pretending to watch the distant sunset, but my heart was pounding, wild and quick, as if something was breaking through the soil with spring's own reckless vitality. Back in my room that night, I closed the door, leaned against it for a while, and then couldn't help but smile. The mint on the windowsill swayed gently in the night breeze. I walked over, touched its tender green tip with my finger, and whispered, Did you see that? I think I'm starting to live a good life. The second half of April filled with small, bright, everyday things. Aining took me out sketching frequently, sometimes to the old town alleys to paint ivy-covered walls, sometimes to the docks on weekends to paint the moored fishing boats. My drawing skills didn't improve much, but the feeling of being genuinely appreciated and accompanied was like a dry sponge soaking in water, every pore drinking in the moisture. Penny observed it all, and one lunch break she sidled over, a straw dangling from her lips, grinning knowingly, progress, huh? When are you going to treat me and Aining to a matchmaker's meal? I swatted her with a file folder. It's not even close to that. Come on, you two leave together after work, go out together on weekends, and you're even using the watercolor techniques he taught you. What more do you need? Are you planning to wait until you're across the Pacific? I was speechless, bent over pretending to organize files, but I couldn't suppress my smile. Penny, satisfied, drifted away with her straw. Meanwhile, contact with home continued at a slow but steady pace. Catherine's admin job was going reasonably well. Her social media posts often showed mundane office scenes, captioned with lines like sorted 3/4 worth of archives today, or worked until 8. The cafeteria still had leftovers. But I knew that for someone who had once lived comfortably and shopped only at upscale supermarkets, lowering herself to such work was a profound change in itself. At the end of April, Catherine posted in our little group that Evan had placed 9th in his midterm exams and received a most improved certificate in Chinese. She attached a photo, Evan holding up the certificate, standing in the school corridor. His missing tooth had grown back, and he wore the blue and white school uniform, grinning from ear to ear. I zoomed in and looked for a long time. He seemed thinner, taller, his features gradually shedding baby softness and taking on a boyish clarity. I saved that photo and, for the first time, made a voice call to my aunt. She picked up immediately, her voice bright with surprise. Xiao Ai. Oh, you finally called. How are you doing over there? Are you eating well? All good, Aunt. How's your health? Last time you mentioned high blood pressure. Are you taking your medicine on time? Taking it. Your sister's been on my case every day about checking my pressure. It's a nuisance. She complained in a half-joking tone, but her voice carried unmistakable warmth. Xiao Ai, let me tell you, your sister really has changed a lot. She never used to care about my medicine before, but now she comes home from work and even washes the dishes and cooks. Her cooking is still too salty, but her attitude is much better. I listened to her chatter, and felt another knot inside me loosen. We talked for nearly 20 minutes. At the end, she said, Xiao Ai, if you can make it back for summer vacation, do come. You don't have to stay at your sister's, my place has a room ready for you. Evan talks about you all the time. Says the Lego you sent is built and displayed on his nightstand. He won't let anyone touch it. I was quiet for a few seconds, then said, I'll see, Aunt. If work allows. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the thick green foliage. The trees at the end of April gleamed brilliantly. Every leaf seemed washed by sunlight, shining with glossy vitality. I thought of that early autumn backyard 7 months ago, the scattered coals, the rolling stakes, the searing slap on my face. It felt like a lifetime ago. I had thought that slap would nail me forever to a cross of humiliation and anger, but instead, it had become the starting point of my escape. Early May, Labor Day holiday. Penny and Aining each went back to their hometowns, leaving me alone in Nancheng. On the first day of the holiday, I slept until I woke naturally. Sunlight had already squeezed through the curtain gap, laying a long golden stripe across the bed. I made coffee, sat on the windowsill reading, and halfway through my phone buzzed, a photo from Aining, a shot of his Tainan home's courtyard, with a huge old mango tree heavy with green fruit, and a middle-aged woman below gazing up, her back looking warm and kind. Beneath the photo he wrote, My mom heard I'm teaching you to draw. She's sending 2 boxes of mangoes back with me for you. I held the phone and laughed out loud. I replied, Thank your mom for me, and saved the photo. In the evening, I walked along the coast, far to the east, all the way to the foot of an abandoned lighthouse. It hadn't been lit for years. Its rusty iron ladder was overgrown with vines, but as the sunset fell upon it, it still held a silent, solemn beauty. I sat on a rock beside the lighthouse, and watched the sun sink slowly into the sea, setting half the sky ablaze with brilliant orange. Right then, I made a decision. During summer vacation, I would bring Evan to Nancheng for a week. He should see the sea, and see if the sun here really is bigger than the one at home. He should also see that his aunt, in this unfamiliar city, was slowly growing into a tree strong enough to shelter herself from the wind. I sent Catherine a message. Let Evan come stay with me for a few days this summer. I'll arrange it. Catherine's reply came quickly, just one word, okay. Thank you. Followed by a small crying emoji. I knew it wasn't sadness. It was the soft release of a weight that had been carried for too long, finally gently caught. The sea breeze blew across the water, carrying the warm breath of early summer. I stood up, brushed the sand off my pants, and turned back along the path I'd come. Street lights were already on, stretching my shadow long across the concrete revetment. I listened to the echo of my own footsteps, each one felt steady and clear. In the distance, the city lights were coming on one by one, like a newborn sea of stars. I knew that the early autumn backyard was now firmly behind me. What lay beneath my feet was fresh, my own ground. And ahead, there was the sweetness of mangoes, the sunrise by the sea, a child's sun drawn on paper, and that ponytailed boy whose ears turned pink when he painted, standing at the turn of the season, smiling at me with crinkled eyes. There's still a long way to go. I will live it well.